Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this current version of Wealth Builders and Wealth Builders Investments webinar. On behalf of Billy and Becky Epperhart, my name is Chad Franzen, Certified Financial Planner at Wealth Builders Investments, and I would like to welcome you to our Wealth Builders Investments, what we're calling the Second X webinar. So we're really excited that you're here, whether you're watching it live or watching it recorded. Again, we're recording this here in July of 2022, so there's a lot going on in the markets and the economy and the world, to say the least. So we know that each of you watching are looking for clarity on the economy and how to make sense of making money for making a difference. So thanks for being here. On today's program, I'm going to be covering the second X. And if you've read Billy's book, Money Mastery, or heard him speak on the topic of the triple X teaching, then you're going to know exactly when we say the first X or the second X. But don't worry if you haven't, if you're not familiar with that, I encourage you to pick up Billy's book, Money Mastery, but we're going to dive into that. As far as housekeeping items, we'll do the presentation. I'm going to share some slides for you all so you can kind of follow along, and then we do have a chat room available for question and answers. So if you're watching this live, please feel free to enter questions in the chat, and we will leave about 10 minutes or so at the end for question and answer on that. So thank you all for joining us. We appreciate those of you who are active supporters and followers of Wealth Builders and Billy and Becky Epperhart. And let's jump right into Wealth Builders Investments, the second X. I'm going to get my PowerPoint going here, and we will dive right in so we have time, for questions. So many of you are familiar with Billy's teaching from Money Mastery called the Triple X. And one of the important things at Wealth Builders that we value is how do we get you on a financial plan or a financial pathway to where you can graduate from the first X to the second X to the third X. And so for those of you watching this, you are most likely in the second X, which I'll explain what that means here in a minute. Again, Wealth Builders Investments, if you want more information about our services, you can go to wealthbuildersinvestments.us. And if anything here really percolates and stirs you, you can click on the Invest with Wealth Builders button, and a member of our team will be happy to visit with you on that. Some of you we already work with, so thank you for the honor and privilege to come alongside you in helping you build wealth and make a kingdom impact. This is just our disclosure page. It just says we encourage you to seek professional advice on tax and legal matters, and this is for educational purposes and not a direct investment recommendation. Well, let me give you a little bit of a framework for where we're going to go. Again, this is our second X investing webinar. I want to start by sharing just a little bit about the vision that Billy and Becky Epperhart have, along with myself, for Wealth Builders Investments. And then we'll dive into, okay, I've had some success with investing. Now what do I do? I need to create a little bit more of a comprehensive financial plan. What are some things to be aware of as an investor, as a business owner, as a giver? What are some things that I really need to keep on my dashboard, as it were, as far as things to focus on, things not to worry too much about? And really, our heart behind Wealth Builders Investments is we want to coach and lead others in the creation of true wealth that perpetuates the gospel of the kingdom. So many of you share our passion for wanting to use our ethics in the Bible and what the Word of God says, and use that in not only how we spend money, but how we invest money and how we give money. And we call that becoming a kingdom investor. So we hope that as you join along in the Wealth Builders family, that you share a similar passion for, hey, Chad, hey, Billy, hey, guys, I want to know how to become a kingdom investor. And that's really our heart. We want to guide you from a holistic standpoint on taxes, legal questions, investing, making sure your money is not supporting companies that do not promote biblical values. And if you've heard Billy speak, one thing he's very passionate about is kingdom impact investing. So how do we take our dollars, get a good return, but also help advance the kingdom in not only in the United States, but in third world emerging countries. So that's really our heart. For those of you that don't know, Wealth Builders Investments is a full service registered investment advisory firm. So we're registered in all the states that we work in, and no matter where you're watching this from, we can help you depending on the level of need that you have. Well, let's jump in a little more. When we think about wealth management and the wealth creation process, there's a lot of different components to it at Wealth Builders Investments that come into this. Now, there's a lot going on this chart, but what I want you to understand is that not all levels of financial advice are the same. So much like no two cars are the same, no two companies that offer financial advice is the same. What I want to draw your attention to here on this chart is the center of this circle where it says Kingdom Investor. And that's really our heart for you watching this, is that we want to train you up, empower you on how to become a kingdom investor. Now, there's a lot that goes into that, and some of you have already had some measure of financial success, whether that is as a small business owner or you've been saving very diligently through your company retirement plan, you've gotten out of debt. Maybe some of you have done Peace University and you've gotten a handle on your cash flow and your budget. And those are all foundational things. But when we look at the bullseye on this chart, we really want to take all the different components of this. And let me just cover a few of these to give you a framework for how Wealth Builders Investments, or what we call WBI, can assist you and your family. One of the things you'll see here is faith-driven investment management there at the top. And we're really passionate about this concept that there are certain investments that you need to say no to so that the other things you say yes to will have more of an impact on that. So faith-driven investment management, our thinking for what we do with our money and why we do what we do with it needs to be all driven by the Word of God. Now, many of you I know watching this are very much givers, but certainly when we're creating a financial plan to grow wealth and to make a kingdom impact, we want to have a part of your financial plan that is built around generosity and charitable giving. We meet with a lot of people who have made it all the way to the third X, where they're looking to give away significant portions of their balance sheet or their net worth that the Lord's given them to kingdom impact causes. And whether that's into churches or ministries or orphanages or any type of causes, that's the third X. But even where you are now, sitting today, regardless of where you are, we want you to have a very precise charitable giving plan for how your money is working for you, but also how it's then being used to plant seeds for the kingdom. Now, I don't know if anyone here on this webinar enjoys paying taxes. We often say, well, I don't want to pay any more taxes than I have to legally pay. And so definitely when we're talking about becoming a kingdom investor, now remember, we're in the second X webinar, so we're making some assumptions that you've built some assets, you've made some smart decisions, you've been given some resources to steward to a certain level. Taxes, legal concerns, and risk now become more important to you. And definitely down here at the bottom of this chart, some of the things you're going to need to start educating yourself on and building a team around is around taxes, legal, and what we call estate and trust, and then risk, which we'll get into a little bit more. And of course, the final point on this chart is just we're looking through all these things to make an impact on the world for the greater good. One of the main scriptures that we love to talk about is Deuteronomy 8:18, where we talk about that it's the Lord who gives you the ability to gain wealth. And we really adhere to that at Wealth Builders. But I also love this phrase that Solomon, the wisest man in the world and the richest man who ever lived, in Ecclesiastes 11:2. He said, invest in 7 or 8 things, for you do not know what risk may lie ahead. Now, it was estimated at the peak of King Solomon's reign that his net worth was $2.1 trillion. So let me say that again, not billion, but trillion. And to give you some context for that, I did a little research on that. The top 5 wealthiest humans on the planet in 2022, if you added up the net worth of Elon Musk and Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos, all their net worth combined would only equal about 30% or a third of what Solomon's net worth was. So we know God's wisdom and God's ways of resources are much higher than the world's. And so there's a lot of here just from what the Word of God says on how to build wealth, how to protect it, both from a tax and a legal standpoint, and also not have all your eggs in one basket, as we say. Obviously, I grew up in the Wall Street world and training, but we do not recommend you have all your money in stocks. We don't recommend you have all your money in gold. We like stocks and gold, but we want to follow the wisdom of this. A true financial plan is going to have a lot of different asset classes for you to invest in. So we want to have you in more things than just stocks and bonds. There's really 3 ways to invest your money. So as you think through the money you're saving, the money you're investing through a company plan, or just on your own, I want you to really get familiar with these 3 concepts. And the first one is pro-values investing. And really by that, what we're saying is what companies are out there that are supportive of or promote biblical values. And by that, we mean companies that that do support First Amendment, Second Amendment, that do support pro-life, that are supportive of fair labor laws, that they're doing things the right way, and that would be very supportive of kingdom values. We call that pro-values companies. And I'll show you an example of some of those. These are companies that are really good at what they do, and you can feel good at night investing in them because their values align with the biblical principles and teachings of Jesus. We call that pro-values. Now, the second type of investing is what we call kingdom impact or kingdom social impact. Now, there's a lot of social investing going on in this day and age. It's primarily through the liberal lens, and it's not necessarily advocating kingdom. And in fact, it rarely does. So when we talk about social impact in our network, we're talking about how can we make an impact on the world that advances the Great Commission that Jesus gave in Matthew 28. So kingdom impact, if you've heard Billy Epperhart talk about Tricord Global, that is a flagship example of kingdom impact investing. Now, if you're not familiar with Tricord Global, feel free to visit wealthbuilders.org, and you can learn about some of the kingdom impact investings that we promote. In essence, as the name implies, kingdom impact investing is not so much looking at how much money can we make, it's looking at how can we advocate philanthropy across the globe, and how can we do transformational investing. Now, we talk a lot about transactional money versus transformational money. This second type of investing is surely transformational. Now, the third type of investing is what we call biblically responsible. I put this at the bottom because it's not our primary focus, but I do want you to be aware of it. Biblically responsible is just saying, hey, at a minimum, I don't want the money in my 401k or my IRA or other investment accounts. I don't want them invested in what we call woke companies, companies that are supportive of cancel culture. We want to say no to these things. So biblically responsible is just saying, hey, I want to have my eyes wide open to the fact that a lot of companies that I may be investing in, they may support things, as you'll see listed here, that are in complete violation of what the Word of God says. So again, pro values, kingdom impact, and biblically responsible. So as you think through creating a financial plan, now you're at the second X. So the second X, again, it means you have a measure of financial success. You have some assets, right? You have a couple of quarters to rub together. You now need to make some decisions prayerfully on how to create a comprehensive financial plan. Again, we talked about tax and legal and risk, but when it comes to your money and where it goes, we need to take a little more time at this level to look at, well, what Chad is my money invested in? And again, we really want to focus on pro values and kingdom impact. And we want to say no through a biblical responsible lens of these companies that, quite frankly, are vehemently opposed to Christianity. Now, one of the things that we have recently created is what's called the Pro Values Index. So WBI, we've created a Pro Values Index where we have identified the top 30 public companies that you should boycott or avoid when it comes to your investing dollars. And we've also created a list of the top 30 companies that you should promote, or that are clean in the sense that they are pro values. Now we've got this index available, and you can go to, and we'll bring up a slide later to show you, but you can go to our website, wealthbuilders.org/invest, and you can get a free copy of that index report. So let me just go through a couple of these slides to give you an idea. The Pro Values Index, here's some common names that many of you will recognize if you're watching this here in the United States. Caterpillar, Costco, Fox News, Tesla. These are just a handful of the ones that through our screening process, these companies adhere to pro values. Now, they're not Christian-owned companies like a Chick-fil-A or a Hobby Lobby, but their policies are they're well-run companies, and they don't violate a lot of the First and Second Amendment and pro-life things that we want to adhere to. Now, conversely, this next slide, you'll see many companies here that are household names in the United States and around the world that are on our boycott list. So again, we have 30 companies in the Pro Values Index that we boycott on that. So many of these probably need no introduction or explanation if you follow this. Certainly there's many more that you can probably think of, but Google and Facebook certainly violate First Amendment, and Disney, I think, and Target have been in the headlines a lot about their woke policies and gender policies and the like on there. So again, at the second X, we have to take another step further in our financial management. Again, it's like the parable of the talents. We have to do a little more now because you've been given some measure of resources through your business, through your influence, through assets, and now we just want to know, okay, we live in a world that's Babylon. We need to know who's who, and we need to be really intentional about taking these companies out of our portfolio. Now, I can assure you that many of you watching this likely have companies on our boycott list in your investment accounts. And so we encourage you, if you want to find out more on, hey, how do I know if I have these companies, please reach out to a member of our team at Wealth Builders Investments, and we can help educate you on what you have invested in companies that violate Christian ethics. Now here's a slide. If you've read Billy's book on money mastery, you're familiar with this. This is the triple X factor. Again, I want to camp out here for a couple of minutes just to explain when we say first X, second X, third X. And what you'll see on the left-hand part of the graph is the first X. You will see that black line of income. So that's earned income. So and this is a monthly. This would be like a monthly income over, and then time on the horizontal axis. So that black dot is your income. Typically, that's going to be W-2 or 1099 earned income early on. And that pink or red graph are your expenses. So many of you may have taken Peace University, or you've done some planning on how to reduce debt and how to save money. But the first X, as Billy teaches in Money Mastery, is really when your income is greater than your expenses, right? And you can see that arrow there. And so once you get to where you have more income than your overhead, then you have discretionary cash flow. Now, this discretionary cash flow can be used for any number of things. You can use it on taking trips or, getting into expensive hobbies. You can save this money. You can invest this money. You can give this money. But this is what we call being at the first X. You don't necessarily have a lot of assets on your balance sheet, but you have a measure of financial control because what you're bringing in is greater than what's going out in that sense. Now, most of you, if you're watching this, since this is what we call the second X investing webinar, you should be at this second X here in the middle where it says financial independence. Now, the goal of second X investing, whether you're here today or whether you are on the path from the first X to the second X, is that this lower green line here is what we call passive income. So this is not W-2 income. This is not earned income where you go work 40 hours a week or whatever it is. This is income that is being created. A great example, if you've heard Billy speak, is on real estate. So one of the reasons we like real estate is that it can create mailbox money. It's going to create free cash flow once you get it set up and if it's run properly on that. So to get to the second X, you're going to have passive income. In other words, that's income that is coming in without you having to go into the office every day at 8 o'clock that is approaching what your expenses are. So in an ideal setting, financial independence would be where your passive income, and there's a number of ways you can create passive income, where that money is equal to or greater than what your overhead is. Now, again, we can all watch our budgets and trim our budgets with how much we spend on eating out or on technology and things like that. So, but there's a point where, depending on where you live, what country and what state you live in, where you're not going to be able to decrease your expenses much more than what you can. So the goal in the second X is, how do we take your assets that you have and how do we start making them work for you to create passive streams of income? So I hope that makes sense. Again, we're not going to get into the third X. That's for another teaching. But again, we're all on different parts of the continuum of creating wealth. And for the second X, really the goal around financial planning and wealth creation is, okay, what are the tools, what are the strategies that I can take the assets I've started to build up and have them start to create cash flow, passive income, to where it exceeds, equal to, or exceeds what my overhead is. Feel free to ask questions in the chat if anyone wants clarification. Let's move on. Again, that's triple X factor. It's great teaching on that from Billy. It's in Money Mastery as well as a couple other places. A common question we get is, okay, Chad, well, how do I take these assets I've accumulated and how do I create a plan to where they are creating passive income? Well, there's probably 6 or 8 viable ways to do it. Let me just point out a few here. We mentioned real estate. That's probably straightforward. If you have residential or commercial real estate that's creating cash flow, that's a great way. You can also do dividend investing into stocks. You can invest in fixed income investments that pay a coupon. Many of you may be business owners. So if you truly are a passive owner in a business, and generally we would say you're working less than 20 hours a week, then that would be considered passive income. And then also you'll see some things here on private royalties, excuse me, on oil and gas, anything that would pay a royalty or a distribution. That's a good example. So some of you may have these type of assets, some of you may not. But these are ones when we're creating a Wealth Builders investment plan, we're going to want to look at how can we position your assets to start creating these type of cash flows. Excuse me. All right, let's talk a little bit about risk. What are some of the biggest risks? Some of these go without saying: taxes, inflation, really not knowing what to do. I think would be a very good one. You know, I don't know what to do, and that really becomes a risk. Not being diversified, we talked a little bit about that earlier. I think that's an important one. Certainly in today's environment, inflation would be a primary pitfall. So a lot of things to cover when you're creating a financial plan. Let's look a little bit at cash flow buckets. Now there's 3 types of buckets that you can put your money in. So what we do at Wealth Builders Investments is we can help create a financial plan for you, an investment strategy, and there's different types of buckets. Now I don't have time to unpack this too deep, but what I want you to know at a conceptual level is that there's a taxable bucket, there's a tax deferred bucket, which is that middle one, and then there's what is called a tax-free bucket. Now, if we were live and I had everyone's microphones turned on, I would imagine you might say, well, I probably would prefer to have all my money in the tax-free bucket, and you're right. Statistically, most people do not have very much money in this tax-free bucket. Now, again, a proper financial plan, if you want to get to the second X, you want to be a kingdom investor, is you need to have your money diversified across different buckets. You don't want to have all your money in the first bucket because you're going to pay the most in taxes there. And it's actually impossible, I think, to have everything in the tax-free bucket, but you still want to have some money in there. So again, we want to introduce that idea, the 3 buckets from a tax standpoint. We're not talking about investments, we're just talking about taxes on that. I'm going to skip ahead here. One of the things that Billy teaches a lot on is you want to invest in things that give you a check. And that's one of the reasons why he likes real estate or owning businesses in a passive form. But you know, this guy was a fairly influential thinker in the early 20th century. You might recognize him by his hairstyle alone, but Einstein said compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pays it. And that's really, I think, a key component of financial education behind Wealth Builders is we need money working for us, not us working for money. So that's another reason why to get out of high credit card debt. That's also another reason why in the XXX, we want to have assets that are pro values, that are kingdom impact, and that have interest components working for you, which is what that whole second line on the second X is about. I already shared with you a little bit about Solomon on there. I'm going to skip ahead. I want to talk a little bit about asset classes. And again, I'm going to leave some time for questions here at the end. So feel free to put those in the chat. I have some commonly asked questions as well that I can share on. So when you think about getting to the second X, getting to financial freedom, here's a list of traditional asset classes. Now, if you have been investing for some time, or if you've inherited some money that you're managing, a lot of these may be very familiar to you. Now, a lot of these are what we call paper assets, but we also have physical assets or hard assets. So paper assets would be things as implied, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, any number of brokerage type securities. These are probably the most common. Now, there's also different types of bank and insurance products, such as annuities and CDs, although CDs you don't see much right now because interest rates are so low. Now, the last 3 items here are what we call hard assets. And now, if you work with an exclusively Wall Street firm or Wall Street stockbroker, they're not going to recommend these last 3 categories. physical real estate, physical gold and silver, and oil and gas. And the reason is that Wall Street has no financial incentive to recommend anything but paper assets to you because that's how they make money. Now, there's nothing wrong with paper assets. In fact, we use them quite frequently. However, we really want to encourage you, if you're already working with an advisor or if you're interviewing to work with a financial planner, you want to make sure that they have a kind of a holistic worldview on how to invest using biblical ethics, but also there may be times where some of your money should not be in the stock market and it should be in private investments or maybe even physical real estate or physical gold and silver or oil and gas. So again, thinking like Solomon, we need to have 7 to 8 different types of things going. We don't want to put all our eggs in one basket, even if our financial advisor that we've known for 30 years says to. So I really want to encourage you to really think through. One of the things we do at Wealth Builders Investments is a suitability profile, where we help you understand how much risk and what your time horizon is. And then we can educate you on what type of assets would be suitable to get my financial plan to where I am generating the most cash flow and it's setting up your long-term goals. Then we talked about traditional assets. I want to spend just a couple minutes here on styles. When we talk about investing styles, as you start to build a little wealth, you're going to need to do different styles of investing. Now, all these should be paired to meet your personal risk tolerance, your time horizon. So we really encourage you, if you're interested, visit with us one-on-one and we will walk through, okay, what type of styles are going to be best for me. We could have 2 couples, both the same age and same financial profile, but they may have different goals and different tolerances, and that's going to implement a different financial plan. So again, you can see here there's active, there's passive, there's public, there's private, there's growth, there's income. These are very diverse investing styles. Now, there's not one in particular that I would say, hey, only do this one. I think using a combination of some of these strategies is really important. Again, using that wisdom of Solomon, different asset classes and different styles is going to help you get to the second X quicker, but it's also going to help you protect your wealth over the long term. Now, here's a question we get a lot. Hey, I invest in the market, the S&P 500. That's probably good enough. Well, we've already addressed that a little bit earlier when we talked about biblically responsible investing. If you're just investing in the index, what we call the S&P 500, 60% of the index are companies that support cancel culture, that they are pro-choice, they're highly in violation of Christian ethics across the board. So that if that alone doesn't motivate you, it should. However, a lot of people think, well, I just put money in an index fund. Does that mean I'm diversified? Now, this chart is really hard to read, and I fully understand that. But what I want you to grasp from this is that if you just invest your money through a company 401k or an IRA, and you just say, I'm just going to put it in the large cap index, you're really investing in 5 companies, all 5 of which have a lot of issues. We have a lot of problems with from a pro-values, biblically responsible standpoint. So this is a chart of the 500 largest companies in the U.S., and we call that the S&P 500. And of that, if you put money in an S&P 500 fund, we call them index funds, you're actually, half of your money is going into these 5 companies: Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, which is the parent company of Google, Microsoft, and Facebook. Now, none of these companies we recommend from a pro-values perspective, but even if we took that and didn't consider biblical ethics, this is way too much concentration of your money into just 5 companies, all of which, by the way, are technology companies, growth companies. Apple is probably the most solvent and has the most cash flow of the bunch. But again, this is not true diversification. And so we really encourage folks, really understand what you're investing in, particularly as you're trying to grow your wealth and have cash flow that you can use for kingdom impact. You know, one of the quotes that Billy Epperhart shares a lot is that money is attracted, not pursued. So as we kind of wrap up the presentation here, and we'll do some Q&A, one of the things I want to encourage you is that as you take time to create a financial plan with what you have, really want you to be patient and realize that true wealth, true returns are attracted, they're not pursued. And if you feel pressure to make a decision, to make it happen, oh, I missed out on this great investment idea that my friend told me about at work, I want you just to exhale and just know that the Lord has this and that He has a plan for you, and you're not missing out. You're not too late. And in fact, the next opportunity is really just around the corner. So if you feel pressure to make it happen, the odds are that's probably not God. You probably need to prayerfully take some time and think through that. So money is attracted. You want opportunities that come to you and not ones that you're trying to knock down a door to get into. I want to wrap up with this slide and then with a call to action and encouragement for you. We showed an earlier slide that was the pie chart, and this one is a triangle, and we call this the kingdom vision process. Now, each of you are on different parts of your journey in life and with family and career, marriage, and as well as with your finances and investing and giving. But one of the things that we have found in our research is that, you know, as you go through life, you're really starting at a foundational level with your identity in Christ. And that's why if you see the bottom of this triangle, you know, that's really our starting point. You know, we need to be mature Christians that are in the Word of God, that are filled with the Holy Spirit, in order for us to really climb that mountain of financial impact and financial influence. Now, all these different red lines on the triangle, those are just life comes at us, right? You know, Scripture talks about how, you know, you will have trouble in this world, right? But take heart. You know, there's all sorts of what we call constraints that you'll face in your financial journey, in your personal journey, in your walk with the Lord. Now, in this case, we're really all seeking to ascend towards the top of that triangle when it comes to financial impact, creating wealth so we can use it for the glory of God. And you'll see at the top of that top of that triangle, I call that becoming a benefactor. Now, a benefactor is not an accomplishment that all of us will get to. Some people do, some don't, and there's no shame either way. We know God's going to use each one of us with our relationships and our gifts and our resources. But when we think about financial planning, we're not doing financial planning to retire so that we can go on cruises and play golf. I like both of those things. We're trying to get financial freedom so that then we can then use that money and go bless ministries, go bless the spread of the gospel, orphanages, widows, and people coming to the saving knowledge of Jesus. But you have to know when you commit to going deeper in your finances, you are going to incur some headwinds. So I just want to encourage you ahead of time, you know, be expectant that you're going to have some constraints. It could be your mindset, it could be your way of thinking, it could be any number of things that will come in the way. But I want to encourage you, as this chart shows, that you're going to have breakthrough. And that's why we think having a team of experts around you when you're in the second X or you're approaching that financial freedom and beyond, you really want to have some qualified professionals that share your values, that can really be that team of counselors that Proverbs talks about on that. So again, financial planning, wealth creation, it's a lifelong journey, just as your journey with the Lord is. And at WealthBuilders Investments, that's really our commitment to you is let's sit down and evaluate your goals. where the Lord's leading you with your family, your career, your finances, and let's create a plan that can be evaluated. And it's going to take a lot of effort on your part as well as your team of advisors to get there. So again, I hope that's helpful to give you a visual. It doesn't matter where you are on this chart, if you're just getting on here or if you're maybe at level 1 or level 2. The Lord's got a plan for you, and given the environment we're in the economy and geopolitical concerns, it's really important to have a team of advisors around you that are going to point you in the right direction and have a pro-value or kingdom ethic approach to it. So again, what do we do with this? I really appreciate everyone being on the webinar, and on behalf of Billy and Becky, we're just really excited that you are in the Wealth Builders community. Whatever door you came through, whether it's from one of our workshops or Billy's books or one of our programs, we really want to encourage you that we feel God is calling a group of people to become kingdom investors. And I really do believe, those of you watching this, that something in your heart stirring on, I want to take the next step. I want to be a better steward. I want to help others. I want to have a plan where I can create a legacy, not only for my kids, but my children's children, and for ministries around the world that are sharing the gospel. So I want to encourage you that I really believe the next step for many of you is to create a financial plan. And that is really the next step to becoming a kingdom investor. Is you're going to need to sit down and take some time to just evaluate where you've been, where you are, and really just take some time prayerfully and with a team of counselors of what are the next 2 things I need to do. But I do believe a lot of you, God's calling you to become a kingdom investor, which, as we've talked about in this webinar, there's going to be some tax and legal things that you're going to need to learn about that you didn't know before. You're going to need to look at your investments a little differently from we call it a pro values lens. And you're also going to need to think through and navigate through some constraints that are holding you back from getting to the next level of financial success, personal fulfillment, and kingdom impact. So I hope that's been really helpful. We'll have time here for some questions. We'll check the chat. Again, if you want to learn more about creating a financial plan, becoming a kingdom investor, or if you'd like to get a copy of the Wealth Builders Pro Values Index, easiest way to do that is going to be to go to wealthbuildersinvestments.us, and then in the upper right-hand corner, there's a button that says Invest with Wealth Builders, and you can click on that and fill out a little bit of information, and that'll get you really on track to do 2 things. One, receive the Pro Values Index, which we'd encourage you to print it out and use it as a reference, not only for investing, but for shopping. And then it also gets you in our system for someone from our team to help you with creating a financial plan. So again, wealthbuildersinvestments.us, and you can click on the Invest with Wealth Builders button. So let me just take a minute here and talk about some questions we've got. We've got one question about tips. Great question. Thank you, Michael. So tips are Treasury inflation protected securities. And we do like tips. Many of us are well aware that inflation is at the highest it's been since 1981, as we're sitting here in July of 2022. So those type of investments are really good. Bonds are a little tricky right now, so you're going to have to be careful with bonds, but we do like tips. If your employer retirement plan offer those, we think that's a good investment, and I do like them. There's a couple of index funds that do tips. I think tips are paying around 8 to 9% right now, which is pretty good. Let's look at some of these other questions. We've got a question about Morgan Stanley. I mentioned Wall Street firms. I did work at a very large, reputable Wall Street firm for a number of years when I started my career. I'm very thankful for that opportunity. Got some amazing training from some amazing leaders. I think this is a great question, Carol. I think, we encourage you, if you have a financial advisor, planner, CPA you're working with, and they're doing a good job, we just encourage you to go back to them and ask questions. And just ask them, hey, Mr. or Ms. Advisor, I'd really like to start implementing pro values or biblically responsible investing. What do you know about that? How can you help me in that regard? Some of them will have the ability to do that, and some of them will not. But I think just asking them the question. You can also request a copy of the Pro Values Index, and then you can share that with your advisor and say, hey, I'd really like to avoid these companies and I'd like to invest in these companies. What do you think? So great question on that. And I think that's true for all financial advisors. You just want to ask them, even if they're Christian advisors. I have a lot of friends that are, but you need to be your own advocate for becoming a kingdom investor. We talked a little, let's see, we've got a question about retirement funds. And yeah, Bob, thanks for your question. It's pretty common for corporate retirement plans to have a lot of woke cancel culture companies in there. And unfortunately, that's a major limitation right now. We're hoping there'll be some changes on that. But typically, your company retirement plans, they only have so many investments that you can invest in. What you can do on that could be limited. You can ask your company. Now, if you've retired from this company or terminated employment, you can roll that money out to an IRA, and then that would solve your problem. But I'm going to assume you're still working there. And you would want to find out, you want to look at the menu of investments and see if there are any that don't have some of these companies in there. I would use that Pro Values Index as a reference guide and just compare which funds have those companies and try to avoid those. But other than that, you may be a little challenged from that regard, unless they have other options on their menu that are not woke. We've got one other question about real estate. I mean, we do like real estate. Obviously, I think that's a pretty personal question. We'd be happy to chat with you offline on the question about land. Of course, land, undeveloped land, it just depends on where it is and what the prospects are. Land does not pay a dividend or cash flow, but you might follow up with us online for that question, and we could visit with you a little more. Carol, if you want to reach out to us, and we probably need a little more information about it just to advise you on that. So, well, great questions, and we really appreciate it. I want to be respectful of everyone's time here. Again, many of you, you're at different parts of the journey. Again, just in closing, I want to encourage you to really prayerfully consider how can you take your finances to the next level. And Billy Epperhart and myself and our team, we really believe that investing with a pro values approach and using that XXX chart, as we showed earlier, if you really take that to heart, I really believe that the Lord's going to bless it. And as you have your money working for you and you're not working for money, then you're going to start to create cash flow, whether that's through real estate or dividend stocks or other things, to where you're going to have financial freedom. Now, we don't like talking about the word retirement in our world, but we really view it as financial freedom, to where you have freedom of time, freedom of money to make maximum impact on your world. So I want to thank every one of you for joining us for this Wealth Builders Investments Second X webinar. I hope you found it beneficial. And again, if you would like to learn more about our services, feel free to visit wealthbuildersinvestments.us. And if you have questions, you can contact us through the webpage. If you have individual questions on am I investing in woke companies? How do I invest in pro values companies? Or you may be in a place now where you say, hey, Chad, I'm ready to create a financial plan. I recognize the value and the wisdom of that. You can contact us through wealthbuildersinvestments.us. And again, there's just a button in the upper right-hand corner. And of course, for all things Wealth Builders, workshops, new books, visit wealthbuilders.org for many of our workshops, as well as our free educational content. So thank you so much for attending this Second X webinar. On behalf of our entire team at Wealth Builders, I want to thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, God bless and be safe.